IVM.
Welcome to All Things Policy, a daily podcast by the Takshashila Institution. We are a bunch of policy nerds based in Bengaluru, and we like bringing fresh perspectives to Indian affairs and Indian perspectives to global affairs. So grab a cup of coffee, sit back, and join us for today's chat.
Hi, welcome to today's episode of All Things Policy. My name is Sridhar Krishna. I'm a senior scholar at Takshashila Institution. And I have with me today another colleague, Bharat Reddy, who's a program manager at Takshashila. His interests are in the area of technology, public policy, and about the interests of the Indian nation, India, right? So I think that's really what we both are from Takshashila. We've both been working on a couple of projects together. I've worked on projects which involve creating jobs in India called the 20 Million Jobs Project. Bharat's been leading this project on AI governance and how we can use AI more effectively in India and what are the areas in which AI needs to be governed and like where regulation has a role to play. But today, I think we're going to talk about how AI can help us increase state capacity and improve the state's ability to deliver goods and services to the population, to its citizens. Right? So, Bharat, welcome to our show.
Thanks, Sridhar. It's nice to be here talking to you.
Yeah. So, Bharat, I was reading a book recently written by Raghuraman, Rajan, and Rohit Lamba. It's called Breaking the Mould. And they had ideas for economic progress of India and so on. But here, one thing they point out is India's got poor state capacity. I think I was reading another article work by Devesh Kapur, where again he talks about India's shortage of state capacity, and a lot of people have been saying things about it. Right? It's not a secret. So if you look at India's population, we have like less than 4.5 civilian employees per thousand population from in the state. I mean, like government's employees are less than 4.5 for every thousand people population. But in the US, in comparison, has over 8. Even the US used to have about 10. It's sort of come down to about 8. But the point is that India is also like it's just going down. It's not going up. While there is a jobs crisis, we have like all these things. Why aren't people are looking for government jobs? Why is it that we have this level of poor state capacity in India? While I see that we're able to do certain things well, right? I think like we're talking about we're able to conduct elections across the length and breadth of its country. I remember in 2004, I was like hiking in Ladakh, and I saw somebody carrying a voting machine on his back and going there to go and collect votes from a village where he said 10 people are going. There are 10 potential voters, right? So I think like that's the level of at which we are able to go out and do something. You look at India's digital government. I mean, like the kind of things that we're able to do in digital, the way the government has embraced digital, that seems to be like far superior to its peers. And according to some people, like, I was listening to Michael Spence, the Nobel laureate talk, and he mentioned that it's probably the best in the world. So this is on one side. On the other side, we have very poor quality of education, healthcare, and so on. What is this reason for the poor state capacity in India?
So, Sridhar, state capacity is defined as the ability of the state to do the things effectively that it wants to do, right? And there can be a lot of reasons why India has weak state capacity. So, in Devesh Kapur, what he argues in his paper is that there are the three big reasons for this. One is that the Indian state lacks the resources compared to other big states. And if you look at how the Indian state fares, it lacks the resources. This could be people resources, like you mentioned, that you have lesser people to take up these roles. And there's a very stark difference when you compare India with other countries like US or China. What Devesh Kapur notes is that in US or China, in states which have a federal structure, basically, there are a far greater number of government employees at the local level compared to the state or the union level. And in India, it's the opposite. You have more employees at the state and union levels, more resources also at the state and union levels, and the devolution in whether it's the resources or whether it's the number of personnel who are in charge of doing all these activities, they are very less at the local level. So this is reason number one. The second one is that he claims that India is a precocious democracy. We have we have become a demo, and you've heard a lot of these predictions that India was not predicted to remain a democracy for very long when it attained freedom, and it was expected that there'll be a dictatorship or something like that which will come about very soon, right? And that has not happened, and for a lot of other reasons. But the unique characteristics of India at that time was that we became a democracy at very low levels of income, at very low levels of literacy, and there were a lot of religious and social tensions also at the time when we became a democracy. So you see that because of all of these reasons, there are a lot of pressures to redistribute, right? So, and this will have some kind of impact when you look at the priorities for the government. So if you're looking at some simple examples like water pricing or electricity pricing, there's always pressure to keep it very affordable to the person who earns the least, and who it should be affordable to the lowest income segments of society. And if that means taxing the industries having to pay more for electricity or more for water, that's a cost that we are willing to bear as a society. These kind of factors come into the picture when we have attained democracy at a low level of income or literacy and so on. So this was reason number two. And the third reason was that even though you'll see that we are a democracy, we have all of these institutions in place, but we tend to perform poorly when there are issues which require challenging social norms or structures which have been developed over so many centuries, right? So and a simple example of this again would be that you might have cooking gas available at affordable prices to every household, but if there are beliefs that food cooked over a wood fire is tastier or healthier for the family, and then you are expected to use those kind of processes for cooking, it's really difficult to challenge those and bring about reforms when these are so ingrained into the way we live and the way we live our lives, right? So these are the big three factors that Devesh Kapur identifies as as things that limit our state capacity to deliver good governance or public services. And it's not contrary to popular belief. It's not that we are a bloated state. There are too many things that we are the Indian state is overstaffed, or contrary to those kind of beliefs, we're actually understaffed. We have social norms and prejudices that we need to overcome when we try to address these challenges, and that we are a premature democracy, and there are consequences of that as well. So these are the two big reasons.
But tell me, I understand your point about if we are, I think the first part I understand, we don't have enough people is a fact. We'll come down to why we don't have enough people. And I think you mentioned that it's lack of resources, etc. But those positions are there. They are sort of left vacant. I think IITs have inadequate number of people. Judges, there are positions which are sanctioned, which are not filled. So I think I'm not sure that lack of resources sort of explains this as much as maybe we don't have the right levels of qualified people available and willing to join government. Yeah. So I think that's something that we need to sort of think of. I think, but we definitely have it's a fact that we have low capacity because we have fewer people. But why we have fewer people is still not really clear in my mind. We'll come to that. But I think the second part, you talked about, so challenging social norms, etc. Why I understand why it would impact if, like today, we wanted to change from using cooking with coal to cooking with gas. There could be some social norms which are hard to sort of overcome, or etc. But why does it affect education? Why does it affect healthcare? What's the problem there?
Education, for example, if there are beliefs that the girl child doesn't need to get educated, or they don't have any use for an education beyond a certain level, those are things that as a society we need to overcome, and we need to challenge those beliefs. If Even if the best education is available to people, if they're not going to opt for it, or if these kind of beliefs don't change, it's really hard to deliver like education to all if half the population doesn't see the need for it, right? So similarly with healthcare.
But I think we also, but we also had a problem. I mean, sticking with education for just another minute, I think when you look at education, our government teachers are actually better paid than many private school teachers. So it's not like we should, like in theory, be attracting the best to come and join as teachers in a government school. But I think there seems to be a lack of ability of the state to ensure that the teachers are teaching properly, that the curriculum is updated regularly, that the school infrastructure, etc., is up to par. I think those are also the challenges which, because of inadequate state capacity, maybe not enough people, and so on, we are unable to sort of ensure that those who are in power, or those who've been given those tasks to perform, uh, are held accountable. While in the case of,
This,
yeah, hmm,
this is similar to what there's this other famous paper by Lant Pritchett where he describes India as a flailing state, where you have a strong head which comes up with all of these grand plans and policies and all of that. But when it comes to implementing them, the limbs of the state, which are these field level agents, they have their own agenda, they have their own incentives, and which might not always be aligned with performing the tasks which result in the outcomes envisioned by the state, right? So you have, and you can't always control these actions of these field level agents and ensure that they are working as expected. And so the delivery at the last mile always suffers because of these principal agent problems.
yeah, and I think, like, that sort of tells me something interesting. I remember, I realize, when you look at implementation of AI, for instance, one of the things that could happen when you implement AI is that you need a strategy and you need somebody to execute, and, like, there's a lot of middle management involved in organizations and so on. And even with general digital and general technology, there is a sort of missing, there is a sort of decline in the role of middle management. Yeah, and that's, if we have a weak middle management in the whole state apparatus, then maybe AI can come in and help, right? So it comes down to my basic question on this podcast, which is, how can AI help? And before you answer this question, let's take a short break.
Stay tuned to All Things Policy. We'll be right back after a short commercial break.
Okay, welcome back. So, Bharat, I was asking you just before our break, how can AI help in fixing this problem? I mean, you talked about a flailing state. You talked about a state where, like, there might be grand visions, etc., of, like, things to be implemented. We are able to, therefore, when it's a time-bound small thing, even if it's a complex task, time-bound, like conducting elections, we manage to do it because it just has to be done. It requires intense focus for a short period of time by everybody, and it sort of gets done. But when something is to be done over a long period of time in a routine sort of manner, it requires a certain level of consistent effort to manage. And that layer of management seems to be sort of missing or it seems to be incompetent, or it has other agenda. All these things lead to India being a flailing state. I like the term flailing state, and as against a failed state or something else. But how can AI help in dealing with this? Or can it help?
Yeah. Firstly, maybe we can define what we mean by AI, because there's a lot of the popular understanding of the term might be driven by what we read in science fiction, and we might have these ideas of these recursive self-learning algorithms which surpass human intelligence, and we are they reach a point where we are not able to understand how they think, or you know compete with them at any level, right? So that's one idea of general self-learning AI. But you have a lot of artificial intelligence applications in simple tasks that we interact with every day, right? So it might be recommendations for a movie that you see on Netflix, or a spam filter that your email provider uses to filter the what's important to you from other things that you might be getting in your inbox. So all of these are AI applications as well. And so these are just prediction systems which are trained on large data sets, which are good at pattern recognition. It might be text based pattern recognition or audio visual pattern recognition. So these are tasks which a machine or an algorithm could do better than a human could do. They don't tire very easily. They can do these same repetitive tasks over and over again throughout the day and achieve the same level of consistent output, which a human would probably not be able to do. This is broadly what you can think of as AI. Now, when you look at a lot of the tasks performed by the state, there are.
And we're not talking about artificial general intelligence or something futuristic. We're talking about what's available today, what's available in a sort of mature form today, and how it can be used. That's what you're talking about, right?
Right, right. And when you look at a lot of the tasks that the state does today, there are a lot of areas where these kind of tasks are there, where which is usually where we see a lot of friction when we interact with the state. So if you're looking for some information on how to do something, or the things that you need to apply for some service, or say a driving license or a passport or whatever it is, right? So the information that you require in a form that you can understand, you can make sense of. So all of these things are things that you can look at improving the efficiency, looking at improving how effectively these services are delivered to the masses, right? So, and when you think of the scale at which this needs to be done, it can be done more effectively by maybe augmenting AI into some of these tasks. So, what are those tasks in which you can augment AI, and what are those things where you can see the benefits of doing this? Is something that we can maybe
Yeah.
think about and discuss further.
Yeah, I think that's very interesting, because I think if I take some simple things, right? So let's take law and order. We have probably the most. I mean, we live in Bangalore. We know how bad traffic is. Everybody talks about Bangalore. Anytime I have a visitor coming in from Bangalore, they ask me, "How do you guys manage with this traffic? It's so terrible." But I mean, we know that Bangalore is a fabulous city in many other ways. But the point is that we do have terrible traffic, and how can AI help? How can AI help in, say, traffic management? That's one. The second area maybe you can talk about is I also am associated with an organization called Daksh, and working in the area of judicial reform. I was looking at some data around, like, delays in justice, etc. And we know that, like, our justice, access to justice in our country is very poor. And the quality of justice we receive is bad, not because the quality of decisions, but because it just takes way too long. If someone occupies my house and I need to get my house back, and if it takes me 15 years to get it back, then is it like really justice, right? So
Right.
let's take these two areas, for example, and you can tell me how AI can help.
So I think promising, I mean, areas where you can think of augmenting AI with fewer risks are those where there's lesser discretion involved. So traffic management would probably be one of those tasks, where one of those areas which has clearly defined rules. You can augment AI to find when these rules are being violated and enforce traffic rules more effectively. Trying to so, for example, you can think of cameras installed, which are probably already being done. You can think of cameras being installed at these different junctions, and you can catch violators of traffic rules. You can catch maybe people not following lane discipline as well. And you can do it at a scale which people on the ground will not be able to do. And you obviously need a lot of infrastructure to set this up. You need a database with all of these. The vehicles being registered, you need all of that to back it up. But you can do things like you can model traffic flows, you can catch violators, you can do predictive maintenance of the roads based on where you see hotspots, where you see these moving very slowly. So you can react faster to it, and you'll be able to do things in at a larger scale, at a quicker response time. And these are things that you can see clear benefits of AI without too many risks, possibly, right?
Right.
So you
And
have
I can
clearly
also see, yeah, and I can also see greater acceptance of something like this, right? Or
right,
with AI. I mean, for instance, use of Hawkeye in tennis
right,
has improved has completely reduced the number of times that like players have scraps with the umpires. When I was growing up and playing tennis, that was the biggest thing which would happen. I grew up watching McEnroe and Pogue, and then saw how
right,
McEnroe would sort of go and like fight. But now with Hawkeye, I think the arguments are no longer there. You sort of accept that this is what it is, and you sort of move on. So I think that's something that we have sort of observed, and
right.
it's happened. And I think with traffic, it's similar. There's no discretion. Somebody
Exactly.
violates, you can catch things. You know exactly what you want. It's well defined. Nobody has two opinions on whether the traffic should flow smoothly or not. There's no vested interest in slowing traffic down. All that is
Right,
absolutely clear. But let's talk about
right.
justice. You even talked about the judicial system, not necessarily the judges, but like how can you help because there I would think there's a lot more discretion involved. So what did you think? What were you thinking when you said that?
So again, like you said, the judiciary is one area where you can think of it as something which involves a lot of human discretion, where you have seen a lot of problems whenever AI has been introduced to reduce some of the workload, trying to do predictive policing or trying to help judges by predicting recidivism rates, the likelihood of criminals to who are going to reoffend, and then using that input as a factor in sentencing, right? So you see that there's a lot of bias that comes into these
Yeah,
algorithms and all that.
yeah.
But
So it's not very
there are
popular, right? It's not. The
it's not
US
very
has been
popular.
doing it. It's not very popular. It's probably and it if there has been a bias against one particular race at one time, that sort of leads to bias when it comes to the data bias leads to bias in actual outputs from the system, and therefore, more people of a particular race get longer sentences while people of another race might not. So
Right,
that's
exactly.
actually that's a reason why you may not use AI. But what are the ways in which you can?
You might not want to use it because of these things, right? Even though you try to mitigate all forms of bias, and I think that it might creep in some unexpected ways, just because of the history, the biases in the people who have delivered past judgments. So you have a lot of bias which has come into the data that you have, and when there's an algorithm trained on that data, it is also going to
Give the similar output. Yeah,
perpetuate those same
correct.
biases. Yeah, exactly. But if you look at some of the recommendations that the Supreme Court has made in the recent State of the Judiciary report, so they talk about some areas which can benefit from AI, using AI to complement or to support the workload of the judiciary. So these include tasks like translating judgments into different languages, so caseload management, roster management, dictating orders and judgments, judicial knowledge management, or natural language processing. So these are all things which a lot of the judges actually have to do in parallel to delivering judgments. So a lot of their bandwidth goes into, say, roster management. They need to look at scheduling a case at a future date, seeing that it doesn't conflict with other things. Managing all of these things is a significant burden to in addition to all the other things that the judge.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if you are looking at any theory of constraints, professional would tell you that if you know a bottleneck, if you know that the number of judges being low is a bottleneck for the delivering justice, ensuring that judges do not do tasks that can be done by someone else, or in this case, an AI, can help increase their output and therefore speed up justice delivery. Right. So I get that.
Right. So even if you don't think of judiciary as something that is automatable or can be performed with AI, there are many tasks within the judicial area or the activity itself which can be looked at as less discretion tasks, and these are the ones you can think of getting AI to augment the workload of the judges.
Yeah, I think I was reading this report on by IMF on AI and jobs, and they talked about two things. They said like there are three groups of. The first thing they said was, you don't automate a whole job, you might automate certain tasks. So,
Right.
So you break up a job into multiple tasks and figure out which of those jobs tasks can be automated, and that would help. And then they talk about it as some things where AI can do sort of independently. They talk about something which has low complementarity and high complementarity, right? So those which are completely like, there are call center jobs, etc., which can be like used to like completely automated. So for instance, if I'm a citizen of India and I want to know about what are the kind of schemes that are applicable to me, what are the benefits that I can get, it's hard for me to go and find out today. But if you had a nice AI system which could answer these kind of queries from people, then people will not like miss out because they don't know. If I want to go and get a health insurance, enroll myself in the health insurance scheme, then I don't know how to do it. I can call this number and maybe a call center can sort of help in doing that. So that's one way by which, it can be used to sort of make these kind of services available to public, and so that whatever schemes are there can be used. The other type he talks about are the high complementarity ones, right? So they say if it's high complementarity, then therefore these are tasks which can be where there won't be social acceptance or otherwise of the job being completely done by AI. At the same time, maybe technology-wise also, it requires so much discretion that it can't be sort of done. But the productivity can go up. So I get your point on judiciary, etc., being some of those areas where you're not happy with AI taking decisions on what sentencing should be. But I hear you when you say that it can be used, but nobody minds it if AI is used to improve scheduling. Because I think that's one area where we believe that judges are using too much discretion in deciding which cases come up to be heard first. And taking away that and putting it in a more rule-based system might actually help the cause of justice. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
So coming down to this, are there some broad rules, some frameworks that you can think of where you say like, hey, these are the kind of things that maybe we can get AI to help augment state capacity, and here are the areas where I think in the foreseeable future we're not going to see. Do you have something like that in mind?
So this is again something that we at Takshashila have been working on in the past month or so. So what we think, for example, is that now, so Kelkar and Chai in their book In Service of the Republic, they identify 4 factors which determine which are the tough problems for a state. Now, these factors are one is the number of transactions. Something that's high on number of transactions is more complex because you need to, spread your resources to address all of these different things that are going on, and it's a burden for the state. The second is the necessity for discretion. When you have discretion that is high discretion in the hands of the agents of the state, you cannot hold them accountable. There's a lot of ambiguity in defining outcomes, and so again, those are tougher challenges. And the third is that if there are higher stakes for individuals are trying to you usually will have a lot of incentives to try and influence the outcomes in their favor, so that again makes it more complex. And the last is if there's a higher level of secrecy, that also makes it more complex. So if there's a higher level of secrecy, it means that you cannot have good feedback loops which go and feedback into the system and try to improve it, because you don't have a lot of transparent metrics coming out and giving you clear information about how that process works, how it is supposed to work, and so on, right? So these are the four factors: transactions, discretion, high stakes for individuals, and high levels of secrecy. Now, two of these areas, which is discretion and the number of transactions, are factors that Kelkar and Shah identify as those which can benefit from automation. So this could be automation by using IT systems, or it could also be automation in the of the kind that we are talking about, using AI systems. So when you have a larger number of transactions, that complexity could be reduced significantly by using these systems. And when you have lower discretion, these are tasks which are more suitable for rule-based decision making. So you can think of a framework consisting of a 2x2 where you have discretion on one axis and transaction volume on the other. So the ones which rank highest in terms of transaction volume and low in terms of discretion are the ones which are more suitable um, for AI or IT systems to come and reduce the workload for these things. So these are, again, like we discussed, it could be traffic management, it could be tax compliance, it could be a bunch of other things that you can think of, right? So
right. Because I understand the part. I think like where there is large volume of transactions and low discretion, and even if it's however complex the action might be, if it can be sort of automated, that's true. But I think today with AI, I think you have the ability even to deal with tasks which require discretion, because even that discretion it learns from past decisions and so on. I think in such situations where it requires discretion, I get your point that what I'm hearing from you is that you sort of break those jobs down into tasks, and within those tasks, identify tasks which are high in transaction, low in discretion, and automate that first, and use the rest for maybe better information. For instance, I used to work in healthcare before, and I understand that AI can help in recommending treatment pathways to physicians, right? You do tests, you do various things, and you can come up with treatment pathways for physicians. But it doesn't necessarily mean that that is the pathway that people should follow, right? So I think that's a very good situation, good kind of thing. So you break down the tasks and do it, and then use the other for augmenting capacity, informing people, making it easy for them to sift through large amounts of data to come up with insights which will be a little hard for them to do manually, right? So I think those are things. So that's a great framework. So I think that was great. So now can we sort of go into another aspect of it, of this conversation, which is around when everybody talks about AI, and there's a lot of conversation around data. Do we have the amount of data that's required to build a truly effective judicial system? A judicial language model for it. an LLM meant for judiciary, for instance. Do we have good quality data available which we can put together and do? Do we have the physical infrastructure that's required? I understand that AI needs like huge amount of processing power, lots of energy, and so on. So, what's the infrastructure and the data? What do we need to? What does the state have to do to be able to take advantage of the benefits that AI obviously is showing?
When it comes to data, again, a lot of these algorithms might be developed in a context that might be very different to an Indian context, right? You might not have Indian data sets existing at all. So, for example, instead of judiciary, let's take the example of healthcare. If you're trying to do medical diagnosis and you have an algorithm which can detect something by looking at a
An
say
image. Yeah.
an image, some
Yeah.
scan
Yeah.
of some kind. So you might have a lot of other pre-existing conditions that occur in the Indian population, which might maybe obfuscate some of the details, or it might make it harder to detect, and maybe the image quality itself is poorer, or so you might have a lot of other noise that comes into the picture when you're talking about Indian conditions. You might have more diversity. You might have the diet can play a role. The lifestyle can play a role. The languages that we speak can not in healthcare, but languages that we speak. There's so many languages, so those can have implications in some way. So all of these things will definitely play a role, and there's not enough data to support to train all of these algorithms to do a good job, to have it perform fairly across different age groups, across different subsections of society. So this will definitely be a big challenge whenever you think of incorporating AI solutions in any field. And that's again why you need to be very cautious about which are those fields where you think of adopting AI. And the other one, like you said, would be infrastructure itself. So in remote areas, you might not have the necessary infrastructure, whether it's the hardware or the software, or say the sensors at traffic junctions. So all of these things, or an internet access itself. So you might not have all of these things available in different regions, and those again will be limiting factors when you're trying to deploy these systems. You'll also probably face challenges with the political economy also when you're talking about replacing uh, jobs which could be performed by humans with an algorithm or with a machine. There might be some opposition that you'll see, that machines are taking away our jobs, and
Yeah, but in this
there-
case, we are actually talking about a situation where we are all admitting that there's a
yeah.
paucity of state capacity. And let's say that, like, if somebody goes to a primary health center in a village and an AI assisted uh, examination diagnostic tool is able to sort of tell you that here are a few things which are wrong with this person, or helps in triaging the person before they can be sent to a hospital, etc. That would be way better than the current situation that they have, where there's nobody to see them, right? So therefore, I think it's all about making an impact at the margin. It may not solve all problems, but at least it can help in sort of what I'm understanding from this conversation is that it can help in augmenting state capacity, act as a good force multiplier, make sure that the bottlenecks of with respect to judiciary, police, number of police officers, and so on, is sort of overcome by using AI more effectively. I think before we wrap up, I mean, I just want to check, like, whether we have adequate data protection laws and means of managing risk that AI can cause through bad actors and so on.
Yeah, so with regards to the data protection laws, that's again a big concern whenever you think of any like you see with Digi Yatri for example, right? So you have these systems which are deployed at airports, these face recognition systems which are collecting facial recognition data from users, and the way it's been deployed, it's not always preserving the privacy of individuals. It's a private entity that's collecting this data on behalf of the government. You don't know how that data is going to be used. You don't know whether what first of all, people who walk into the airport are not very clear about whether it is mandatory to register for these systems at all. So while it might bring in efficiency in terms of managing the workload, you don't know whether all of these principles of data minimization, adherence to basic principles of privacy, those things will be safeguarded, that they will be implemented, that there'll be accountability frameworks in place. So all of these things are not things. And even the data protection law, there are a lot of exemptions carved out for the state. So when you have these kind of things, you need the state to be more proactive in being establishing proactive measures to see that there can be no room for misuse of this information that's collected, or any data leaks that can harm users, right? So all of these things are things that the state should proactively do before it can even consider adopting any of these kind of systems. And lastly, this is something that's an evolving area, so you need risk management frameworks. You need to adhere to best practices whenever you think of adopting systems like this. So there are regulations that are being framed across the world. So some of them, they try to
Over-regulate.
yeah, they try to focus on ethics or safety or innovation, and I try to balance all of these things. So but especially whenever the state is trying to do something like this, you might have to draw some red lines, that these are things that the state will absolutely not use AI for. These are some things where you can think about using it. And if you're going to consider it at all, these are the practices that you need to follow very strictly, that there should be accountability measures, transparency measures that are in place, and so on, right, before you can do these things. Yeah, so while you can benefit a lot from AI adoption, and you don't have to fear it, you need these kind of guardrails that have to be in place before you can benefit from it.
Yeah. So thank you very much for this conversation. I think we can talk about it for many more hours if we choose to. And what I got from it, and we can sort of conclude, is that yes, India is a flailing state. India has great hopes for the future, great ideas of where we want to go, and so on. But its heads and limbs, its head and limbs are not sort of in sync. And by devolving more powers to the states and the local bodies, but also using AI as a means to sort of augment that capacity, can help India deliver the kind of goods and services that its citizens richly deserve. And at the same time, it's also important to understand what are the types of tasks which we should leave to AI and what we should not. I like the point about the ones which have high transaction, low discretion, or can be sort of done easily without much thought. But there are, for those which require more discretion, more thought is required before we sort of deploy. Safeguards need to be taken with respect to data protection, privacy, and other risks that AI poses. And we need to have be able to collect the right amount of data and from the right sources with the right quality, and have the infrastructure to be able to deploy this. So great potential, but there's a long way to go. But a path seems to be fairly clear. That's my summary? I mean, how would you like to summarize?
No, that's a good summary, Sridhar. We can leave it at that. I just wanted to add one thing. So if those of you who are listening to this find some of the frameworks or the ideas that we have discussed here useful, do check out our GCPP programs. So it's a 3-month-long program on weekends that's offered for working professionals. So you have 3 different specializations: defense and foreign affairs, technology and policy, and advanced public policy that you can choose from. We also have the Network for Advanced Studies of Technology Geopolitics. It's a fellowship that we have just launched. We are accepting expressions of interest for this fellowship, where you can study the areas at the intersection of technology, geopolitics, India's interests, and trying to build expertise in these areas. And so it's a very interesting area to work in, and you'll be working with leading experts who can guide you through this process. So do apply for that if that's of interest to you as well.
Thank you very much, Bharat. Lovely talking to you.
Yeah.
If you liked our show, don't forget to check out other interesting podcasts on the IVM network. You can tune into them on the IVM Podcast app, ivmpodcast.com, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. You can also follow IVM on social media. The handle is @IVM Podcasts on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And hey, if you'd like to dive into Takshashila's research on technology, strategy, and economic affairs, check us out at our Twitter handle @TakshashilaINST or our website takshashila.org.in.